how are you feeling? The world's falling apart about your ears. South Africa's got big debates, crisis debates going on. Well, are they really? Is it all a fudge? Is there really a big problem in South Africa? Before you shoot me, let's have a listen, because we got the Executive Director at GIBS, Jonathan Cook, with me today. One looks at online debate forums, one listens to talk radio, one talks to people in your everyday discussions, and I feel a bit depressed most days, quite frankly, because we seem to be in this downward spiral of negativity.
It is a downward spiral, and it's quite largely controlled by the vocabulary, the words that we use. Moods, of course, fluctuate. Moods fluctuate in individuals. Most of us go through ups and downs. They fluctuate through teams and groups and companies, as our rugby team is discovering at the moment, and in countries, and for that matter in the world. And the current sense of depression, I think, is not just economic. There's a mood of downness across the globe at the moment. And in South Africa as well, because you can read it, as you're mentioning, the social media. And from the lips of our leaders as well, there's a kind of bitterness, a harshness, an anger in the words that we are using. And these words become not just the consequence of what we're feeling, but in fact they become the cause of what we're feeling. Moods are determined quite largely by the habits of thinking that we have, the imagery we have in our heads, and the words that feed these images then obviously feed our moods.
And it's all imminently predictable. David Blunkett, I was interviewing him in a similar position to what you are in right now for GIBS about 2-3 years ago, and I was saying, what is the consequence of the global economic crisis? And David Blunkett very clearly said there will be a swing to the right in Europe, for example. And so with a little bit of foresight and with a little bit of understanding of history and understanding of human nature, you can almost forecast where things are going to go based on the circumstances in which one finds itself. And our South African circumstance is a difficult circumstance. It's a tough circumstance, but it is one that can, with good leadership, be turned around.
Well, it is a matter of leadership, Bruce. That's absolutely correct. And what we have at the moment, of course, is something of a vacuum in leadership, and where there's a vacuum, there's an opportunity for anyone who is charismatic, who has the gift of words, to move in and determine where we go mentally as a nation. And that is happening in a negative direction at the moment, but there's no reason at all why it shouldn't be turned around.
What is the power of an individual in a situation where there is that vacuum? What is it about somebody coming in, filling that vacuum with a compelling argument that drives the debate and pulls the debate down a particular path? Why is it also then so difficult for common sense to come into that particular vacuum and try and fill that space, and it sort of dissipates?
Well, one of the things is this thing about vocabulary, the meaning of the words. The sort of technical term is label, in fact, because what happens is when we use a word, we need to have categories in order to make sense of our world. So that's not a bad thing. But when the categories represented by the words get a status, either positive or negative, then are used to exercise power over other people, those words themselves then create what happens.
Give me a practical example.
Well, take boer. Okay, that started off neutrally as farmer.
Trekboer people, you go back to 1838, the Boere were very proud of the fact they were Trekboere, they left Cape Town, they went into the interior, they populated the interior of South Africa, colonized the interior of South Africa, they were Boere, they were proud of that.
Yeah, so it became a positively labelled word, and when it was used by those in power, we were Boers, the we in power, and it got positive. Now, Boer is they when used by those in power, so it's probably going down.
Language becomes divisive then.
It does, and it exercises power as well. You can see that in xenophobia. When we label people as foreigners, that's okay until that word begins to be associated with power differentials. They are inferior or they are dangerous, and then it does divide, but it also...
Rwanda was a classic case, wasn't it? I mean, it was the cockroaches. Using broadcast media, you've got to go and tread on the cockroaches. And we saw the genocide that followed. It got an appeal. That is the danger of it.
It's a very good illustration, because there are people who have the same language, the same religion, the same race. They had to use words to divide them into different camps. Words that came from colonial times, surely, but words have that meaning. And we can create that meaning. So leaders, and most of us, anyone who has influence in a sense, exercises leadership. Leaders have a big responsibility today, particularly those who are followed, largely across the country, have a responsibility to use words which create an identity that is inclusive. And that creates an identity and a future that can be constructive going forward rather than destructive. And I think what some politicians are perhaps not realizing is that the language that they are using, which is so effective in the short term, is storing up a whirlwind in the long term.
The World Cup is one such opportunity that we had. We utilized it very effectively.
Yes, we did.
But because our intentions weren't real, I suspect we didn't utilize it over the long term. It was a short-term game.
And also because these things are habits. They're habit forming. And in order for new habits to take root, they need to be repeated and repeated and repeated. So the World Cup was great. It was a wonderful opportunity. And what we needed was leadership from all of us, I guess, to continue using those positive words. And there were attempts. Lead SA, for example, is a very good attempt, I think, to capture the vocabulary again of South Africa.
Are we at a tipping point?
Who knows? It feels like it. It really does feel like it. But it is never, never, never too late to change things from one direction to another. If we've proved anything in South Africa, it's that we can change quite remarkably. I mean, that incredible gesture, which is now the iconic one of 1995 when Madiba donned the rugby jersey, he redefined them as us, if you like, putting it that way.
But a simple gesture goes a
Very
long
simple.
way. But also, you can't do simple gestures in isolation. They've got to be followed up with more gestures and more actions. Create the habit.
The habit, exactly the habit.
Jonathan Cook, thank you so much. He's an executive director at GIBS.